Before we dive in, like the video, subscribe, and press the bell icon for more real emotional stories.
This whole rule wasn't meant to be followed. It was meant to make people disappear. Because this whole rule was never about the rule.
The notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between grocery coupons and a pizza flyer, as if it belonged there. White paper, black ink, no logo. Just a title in bold, perfectly centered. Notice of non-compliance. I read it once. Then again, slower this time, feeling something tighten behind my ribs. Effective immediately, all homeowners must adhere to Rule 17B. Exterior items visible from the street must conform to community standards. Failure to comply will result in penalties. That was it. No explanation, no diagram, no clarification. Just a rule number that meant nothing and consequences that felt deliberately vague. I stepped outside with the paper still in my hand, scanning my front yard like I was seeing it for the first time. Trimmed hedges, neutral paint, porch swept clean. Nothing flashy, nothing rebellious. Nothing that screamed problem resident. And yet the notice had my address printed on it. Maplewood Ridge liked to call itself a peaceful community. That phrase appeared on the HOA website, the welcome packet, and the decorative stone sign at the entrance. What it really meant was quiet obedience. Lawns cut to identical lengths. Mailboxes matching shade for shade. Decorations limited to approved holidays and approved sizes. I have followed every rule since moving in 3 years ago. Paid dues early, attended meetings occasionally. Smiled at neighbors without digging too deep. Survival behavior. So why me? Across the street, Mrs. Donnelly watered her roses with surgical precision. She paused, eyes flicking toward me, then back to her flowers. No wave, no nod, just awareness. That was new. I folded the notice and walked back inside, setting it on the kitchen counter like it might explode. The house felt quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were listening. At noon, my phone buzzed. HOA reminder. Non-compliance must be addressed within 72 hours. No signature, no contact name. I logged into the HOA portal, expecting details. The rulebook loaded slowly, page after page of dense language. Rule 17B existed, buried deep, recently updated. The description matched the notice word for word. Still no examples. Still no guidance. Scrolling through the violation log, I noticed something odd. Only one address had been flagged under 17B mine. That afternoon, I walked the block, pretending to stretch my legs. I paid closer attention than I ever had before. Wind chimes hung from porches. Welcome signs leaned against railings. A ceramic gnome peeked out from behind the Harrison's azalea bush. All visible, all technically exterior items. None sighted. At the corner, I ran into Mark from 2 houses down. He was loading groceries from his trunk, movements stiff, eyes darting. "Hey," I said casually. "Quick question, you ever hear of Rule 17B? His hands froze. He shut the trunk harder than necessary. "No idea what you're talking about." "It's about exterior." "Talk to the board," he cut in, already walking away. "They handle that stuff." That was the second strange thing. Mark loved complaining. Parking rules, noise policies, dog leash lengths, he treated grievances like a hobby. But this? This shut him down instantly. That evening, the HOA meeting reminder popped up on the community board. Emergency session. Attendance encouraged. Encouraged was HOA language for ignore this at your own risk. The clubhouse smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet judgment. Folding chairs formed neat rows. The board sat at a long table beneath a framed photo of Maplewood Ridge at sunset, houses glowing warm and perfect. At the center sat Elaine Harper, HOA president for as long as anyone could remember. Silver hair. Calm posture. A smile that never reached her eyes. She tapped the microphone gently. "Let's begin." Routine updates followed. Budget approvals, landscaping contracts. Then Elaine cleared her throat. "Rule enforcement has recently been updated," she said smoothly. "This is to ensure the continued harmony of our community." I raised my hand. Elaine's gaze landed on me instantly, like she'd been waiting. "Yes?" "I received a violation notice," I said, "but the rule doesn't explain what's wrong." "I'd like clarification." A murmur rippled through the room. Neighbors avoided my eyes. Someone coughed. Elaine smiled wider. If you received a notice, then the issue is already clear. It's not, I replied. I've checked my property. Nothing stands out. Her smile didn't falter. Compliance isn't about standing out, it's about alignment. That word hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. So what needs to change, I asked. Elaine leaned forward slightly. Remove what doesn't belong. Silence followed. No one asked a question. No one backed me up. The meeting moved on like nothing had happened. As chairs scraped and people filed out, I felt it, the shift. Conversations stopped when I passed. Smiles faded. Doors closed quicker than usual. Back home, I stood on my porch under the dim light, staring at my perfectly ordinary house. Somewhere in this neat little neighborhood, a line had been drawn. And whatever Rule 17B was really about, it wasn't about appearances. It was about control. The first fine hit my account before I finished my morning coffee. $150 failure to correct violation. Rule 17B. No timestamp, no description. Just a balance due and a countdown clock beside it, ticking toward late fees like a silent threat. I logged in again, refreshing the page, hoping some hidden attachment would appear. Nothing. The message board showed cheerful posts about the upcoming spring social, reminders to trim hedges, a poll about repainting the clubhouse. Normal life. Normal lies. Outside, the street felt different. Curtains shifted when I stepped onto the porch. Mrs. Donnelly's roses were already watered, her house sealed tight like a bunker. 2 doors down, the Harrisons' gnome was gone, not moved, gone. I hadn't noticed when it happened. That afternoon, a white SUV idled at the curb while I brought in the trash cans. The driver never stepped out. Tinted windows, engine humming steadily. When I looked directly at it, the vehicle rolled forward and disappeared around the corner. Coincidence, I told myself. Maplewood Ridge loved coincidence. By evening, a second notice arrived, this one taped to my door. No envelope, no knock. Continued non-compliance may result in escalated action. Escalated how? I called the HOA office, straight to voicemail. I emailed Elaine directly, keeping my tone polite, cooperative, reasonable. I asked for specifics, examples, a chance to fix whatever I was apparently doing wrong. Her reply came an hour later. You've been part of this community long enough to understand expectations. That was it. I walked through my house, room by room, searching for something, anything that could be interpreted as visible and unacceptable. Windows clear, curtains neutral, porch empty except for a plain doormat that had been there since move-in. I stared at that mat for a long time. It was gray, rectangular, unremarkable. I removed it anyway. The next morning, the fine doubled. $300, continued violation. My hands shook as I checked the log. Still only my address listed under Rule 17B. I clicked through older records, filtering by year. The rule didn't exist before last month. No history. No precedent. Someone had created it. And they were using it like a lever. I cornered Lisa from across the street while she was loading her kids into the car. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, fingers clenched around the keys. Have you had any issues with the HOA lately? I asked. Her smile appeared too fast. Nope, everything's great. Because I'm getting fined for something I can't identify. Her smile cracked. She leaned closer, voice low. Please stop asking people about that. About what? She swallowed. About rules that don't explain themselves. Before I could respond, she opened the car door and climbed inside, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, my phone rang at 10:47 p.m. Unknown number. I answered. You're running out of time, a man's voice said calmly. Who is this? Someone trying to help you avoid consequences. I've asked for clarification. I've complied with everything I can, a soft chuckle. You removed the wrong thing. My pulse spiked. Tell me what to remove. A pause, long enough to feel intentional. If we told you, he said, it wouldn't test what needs to be tested. The line went dead. Sleep didn't come easily after that. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every headlight passing through the blinds felt like surveillance. At 2 a.m., I checked the portal again. Notice of hearing compliance review board. Scheduled for 3 days later. Failure to attend would result in automatic determination. I printed everything, notices, emails, screenshots. If this was turning into a legal issue, I wanted a paper trail. What I didn't have was proof that the rule was being used selectively, unfairly, deliberately. On my way to work the next morning, I noticed something else missing. The Harrisons' porch swing was gone. In its place, bare concrete, clean, empty. I caught Mr. Harrison outside, locking his door. "Nice swing," I said lightly. He flinched. "Had to get rid of it," he muttered. I didn't answer immediately. Then he looked at me, really looked like he was measuring whether I was worth the risk. "Once they notice you," he said quietly, "everything becomes a problem." "Notice me how?" His jaw tightened. "By being inconvenient." "Inconvenient to who?" The front door across the street opened. Elaine Harper stepped out of a house I didn't realize belonged to her. She paused, eyes flicking between us, her expression pleasant as ever. Mr. Harrison turned away instantly. Elaine approached me with the ease of someone who knew she held every card. "I hope you're preparing for your review," she said. "I'm trying," I replied. "But I still don't know what I'm being reviewed for." Her smile softened, almost kind. "Rules aren't always about objects," she said. "Sometimes they're about behavior, and mine is resistant." She walked away before I could respond. That was the moment it clicked. Rule 17B wasn't about lawns or porches or decorations. It was about obedience. And until I gave them whatever submission they were actually demanding, the fines would keep coming. So would the pressure. So would the silence from my neighbors. Because in Maplewood Ridge, compliance wasn't encouraged. It was enforced. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, but answers weren't going to wait that long. By Wednesday morning, my account balance had climbed high enough to feel less like a penalty and more like a warning shot. Late fees stacked quietly, each one identical in tone and ruthless in intent. Still no explanation. Still no example photo. Just a digital paper trail proving I had failed at something no one would define. I stopped trying to sleep. Instead, I started watching. Maplewood Ridge moved on patterns. Trash cans rolled out at the same hour. Lights switched off in a predictable rhythm. People waved at the same neighbors, avoided the same ones. Once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. And there were gaps. House on Cedar Lane empty, blinds shut, mailbox overflowing. I checked the portal. No listing. No sale notice. Just gone. On Thursday afternoon, I walked to the clubhouse under the pretense of checking the pool schedule. The real target was the filing room, a windowless space no one used anymore because everything was digital now. No cameras. No lock, just dusty cabinets labeled by year. I pulled the drawer marked 2019 to 2021. Most folders held the usual. Landscaping bids, noise complaints, parking disputes. Then I found one thinner than the rest. Special assessments. Confidential. Inside were meeting minutes that never appeared online. Names were redacted, but addresses weren't. 3 addresses had been cited for non-alignment concerns. 2 of them were empty now. The third was mine. My throat went dry. The language was careful, polished to sound harmless. Words like disruption, disharmony, non-cooperative presence. No mention of decorations. No mention of property condition. Just behavior that challenged leadership cohesion. One note stood out, handwritten in the margin. Resistance spreads if unchecked. I snapped photos with my phone, heart pounding loud enough to feel dangerous. As I slid the folder back into place, I heard footsteps outside the door. I froze. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. Silence stretched thin, taut as wire. After a moment, the footsteps retreated. I didn't wait. I left through the side exit and didn't slow down until I was home with the door locked behind me. That evening, someone knocked. 3 firm raps. When I opened the door, I found a woman standing there with a familiar face and unfamiliar urgency, late 40s. Short hair. Eyes that kept checking the street behind her. "You shouldn't be digging," she said without preamble. "Do I know you?" She hesitated. "I'm Claire. I used to live on Cedar Lane." My pulse spiked. "The empty house?" "Not empty," she corrected softly. "Reclaimed." I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit, just paced, wringing her hands. They don't like questions. Especially not from people who know how to ask them properly. "What happened to you?" Her laugh was brittle. "Same thing that's happening to you." It starts with a rule that sounds harmless, then fines, then hearings. Then letters from lawyers you've never heard of, citing violations you can't disprove. Why not fight it? I tried. She stopped pacing and met my eyes. That's when my employer got an anonymous complaint. Then my sister's custody arrangement was suddenly reviewed. Then my mortgage lender found an issue. I felt sick. They apply pressure where it hurts most, she continued. Eventually leaving feels like relief. Did you sell? No. They forced a foreclosure using unpaid fines I couldn't contest. Her voice shook. Bought the house themselves through a shell company. The room felt smaller. Why tell me now? I asked. Because once you hit the hearing stage, you're on a timer. She moved toward the door. If you plan to resist, don't do it alone. Before I could ask anything else, she was gone. The next morning, the HOA portal updated again. Violation escalated, formal review required. Attached was a document I hadn't seen before, Behavioral Alignment Addendum. It listed expectations that had nothing to do with property maintenance. Demonstrated cooperation with board initiatives. Positive engagement during meetings. Refraining from actions that undermine leadership authority. At the bottom was a single line. Failure to align may result in corrective measures. Corrective. I printed it out and stared at the words until they blurred. The rule was never meant to be followed, it was meant to be used. At noon, I received a message from an unknown account on the community board. You don't have to go through with this. I replied before thinking. Through with what? 3 dots disappeared, then. The hearing is a formality, the decision's already made. Made by who? A minute passed. People who don't like uncertainty. That evening, I sat in my car across from the clubhouse, watching lights turn on inside. A closed-door meeting. Board members only. Elaine's silhouette moved past the frosted glass, confident, unhurried. I understood now why neighbors avoided me. Why Mark shut down. Why Lisa begged me to stop asking questions. This wasn't just an HOA. It was a system designed to remove problems quietly. And the most unsettling part? Everyone left behind had agreed silently that this was acceptable. The rule wasn't enforced equally because it wasn't about fairness. It was about control, silence, and erasure. And I was next in line. By the time Friday arrived, fear had settled into something colder and more precise. Clarity. I stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. The HOA wasn't confused. It wasn't disorganized. It wasn't overreaching by accident. What it was doing required planning, patience, and participation from people who knew exactly when to look away. The hearing was scheduled for 6 p.m. I arrived early, not to plead my case, but to listen. The clubhouse felt different at night. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flattening every color. The board sat in their usual positions, papers stacked neatly, expressions rehearsed. Elaine Harper occupied the center seat like a throne she'd grown into. She didn't greet me. Instead, she tapped her pen once. Let's begin the review. They spoke in turns, each one reading from documents I wasn't allowed to see. Phrases floated past like smoke pattern of resistance, lack of cooperative spirit, failure to integrate. Not once did anyone mention my porch, my lawn, or anything physical at all. When it was my turn, I placed my folder on the table. I want to address the real issue, I said. Rule 17B isn't about appearances. It's about removing people you consider inconvenient. A flicker crossed Elaine's face. Annoyance, not surprise. That's a serious accusation, she replied smoothly. So is foreclosure, I said, especially when it's engineered. I slid printed photos across the table, confidential meeting notes, redacted names, addresses that no longer housed families. 2 board members stiffened. One avoided looking at the papers entirely. Elaine studied them calmly. Then she smiled. You misunderstand your role here, she said. This isn't a debate. No, I agreed. It's an audit. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone swallowed hard. I continued. Those houses didn't just disappear. They were acquired, quietly, through shell companies connected to firms represented by the same legal counsel this HOA uses. Silence. Which means Rule 17B isn't a rule, I said. It's leverage. Elaine leaned back, folding her hands. Even if that were true, she said softly, you'd still be powerless to stop it. That was the moment she made a mistake, because power thrives on secrecy. And I had stopped being quiet. I left the hearing without a verdict. They said they needed time to deliberate. I knew better. Decisions like this were never made in the room. They were confirmed there. Outside, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown sender. They're nervous. That's new. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the county records office. It took hours. Deeds, transfers, LLC filings layered like camouflage. But patterns don't disappear just because someone hides them under paperwork. They repeat. Maplewood Ridge sat on land that had been undervalued for years. Zoned in a way that discouraged development. Quiet, stable, controlled. Until recently. A proposal surfaced 6 months ago, quietly rejected by the HOA for rezoning, mixed-use potential, retail frontage. Increased density. The proposal came back 2 months later. Different applicant, same legal representation as the HOA shell companies. Same signature style. Elaine Harper. The rule was never about residents. It was about clearing space. By Sunday, the pressure escalated. My employer received a call questioning my professional conduct. A noise complaint appeared against my address while I was out of town. The fines multiplied faster now, aggressive, punitive. They wanted me exhausted. I wasn't the first. I visited Claire again. Her temporary apartment smelled like cardboard and old coffee. She listened quietly as I explained what I'd found. They're consolidating property, she said. Slowly, without headlines, and without lawsuits, I added. Because no one fights back, she nodded. Until now. The next morning, a notice appeared on my door. Intent to place lien. That was the kill shot. Once the lien stuck, everything else followed naturally: credit damage, legal paralysis, forced sale. Unless I moved first, I uploaded everything that afternoon. Documents, photos, screenshots, timelines. Not to the HOA board, to a journalist, to a housing watchdog group, to a city council inbox that hadn't been used for years. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Elaine called last. You're being reckless, she said, voice tight for the first time. This doesn't end well for people who don't understand the scope of what they're interfering with. I understand it perfectly, I replied. That's why it ends now. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You think exposure wins? Systems adapt. Maybe, I said, but they don't like daylight. She hung up. That night, unfamiliar cars lined the street. Neighbors watched openly now, curiosity edging out fear. Something had shifted. Once silence breaks, it never fully returns. Rule 17B had done its job too well. It taught me that the rule was never the point. The point was who stayed, who left, and who profited from the silence in between. And tomorrow, everyone would start asking questions the HOA couldn't find a way. The story didn't break all at once. It leaked. First, a local blog picked it up, dry headline, cautious language, buried beneath restaurant reviews and zoning updates. Then a housing advocate reposted the documents with commentary sharp enough to cut through the noise. By noon, the HOA office phone line was down. By evening, Elaine Harper's name was trending in places she never visited. Maplewood Ridge woke up loud. News vans parked at the entrance sign. Reporters asked neighbors questions they'd never been forced to answer out loud. Cameras turned polite silence into visible guilt. The HOA issued a statement calling the allegations misinterpretations by a disgruntled homeowner. They promised transparency. They announced an internal review chaired by the same board members under scrutiny. No one bought it. Still, retaliation doesn't require public approval. It only needs access. My bank froze my account pending verification. A cease and desist letter arrived accusing me of defamation. My employer placed me on administrative leave, citing ongoing distractions. Pressure applied everywhere at once. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the knock on my door the next morning. Mark stood there, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, eyes red-rimmed. I should have said something earlier, he muttered. Why now? Because they came for me last night, he said. Told me my shed violates 3 codes that never existed before. I let him in. By noon, 3 more neighbors had stopped by. Quiet people, careful people, each carrying a piece of the same story. Warnings, threats, fines timed to moments of vulnerability. Lisa showed up last. She didn't speak at first. Just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wall. They asked about my kids, she said finally, about whether my house is stable enough for them. That was the moment the narrative changed. Fear fractures until it finds something stronger to cling to. In Maplewood Ridge, that something was collective anger. We formed a group chat, then a meeting. Not at the clubhouse, at Mark's garage, door half closed, cars parked, blocked the view. Phones recorded everything. Names were written down. Timelines cross-checked. Patterns emerged fast. Every targeted homeowner had one thing in common. They'd challenged a decision, asked for records, or voted against Elaine at some point. This wasn't random. It was surgical. Elaine responded by escalating publicly. Another statement. Another warning about outside agitators. A notice reminding residents that participation in unauthorized assemblies violated community guidelines. That one backfired. The next meeting filled the clubhouse past capacity. Neighbors who'd never spoken at gatherings raised their hands, asked direct questions, demanded answers. Elaine lost control of the room for the first time. Then came the betrayal. It arrived quietly, dressed as help. A lawyer reached out, offering representation. Pro bono, he said, community-minded. He asked for access to our documents, our statements, our strategy. Something felt wrong. Claire confirmed it an hour later. He works with them, she said. Indirectly, same network. We cut contact immediately, but the damage was done. That night, a revised narrative appeared online, using language lifted straight from our private messages. Someone had been listening. Someone we'd trusted. I sat alone on my porch, watching police lights flash at the entrance sign, not for us, for traffic control. Control. Always control, my phone buzzed. Elaine again. You could have had a clean exit, she said. Now you're dragging others down with you. They chose to stand, I replied. Stand on what? She snapped. A story? Paperwork? You think institutions crumble because people get emotional? No, I said. They crumble when the wrong people stop being afraid. She went quiet. Then she said softly, you don't know who you're up against. I know exactly who, I replied. And they're starting to panic. She hung up. By the end of the week, subpoenas started circulating. City Council scheduled an emergency session. The journalist who'd broken the story requested on-camera interviews. But progress came with a price. Mark's shed was demolished overnight. Lisa's childcare license was suddenly under review. Anonymous flyers appeared labeling us troublemakers. Victory wasn't clean. It was heavy. Still, something irreversible had happened. The silence Maplewood Ridge relied on was gone. And once people learn they aren't alone, compliance becomes impossible to enforce. Elaine had built a system that thrived on isolation. We broke it by standing together, but the final twist was still waiting. Because Elaine wasn't the top. She was the face. The emergency city council meeting was scheduled for a Monday night, which felt deliberate. Fewer eyes. Less noise. The kind of timing people choose when they want resolution without spectacle. They didn't get their wish. The chamber overflowed. Reporters lined the walls. Residents from Maplewood Ridge filled the seats, standing shoulder to shoulder in a way the HOA had spent years preventing. Fear still lingered, but it had changed shape. It was outward-facing now, sharpened into focus. Elaine Harper arrived late. She walked in with practiced composure, navy blazer pressed smooth, expression calm enough to sell stability to anyone who hadn't been paying attention. She took her seat without acknowledging the room. The council chair called the session to order. Public comment came first. Lisa spoke. Then Mark. Then Claire. Each testimony added another layer to a story that no longer needed embellishment. Documents were entered into record. Shell companies named. Property transfers traced. Timelines aligned like teeth in a gear. Elaine remained silent. When her turn finally came, she stood slowly, hands folded, eyes steady. This HOA acted within its authority, she said. Every action taken was approved by legal counsel and consistent with community bylaws. A murmur rippled through the room. She continued, Maplewood Ridge required strong leadership during uncertain times. Some residents resisted necessary change. That resistance had consequences. The chair leaned forward. Ms. Harper, who proposed Rule 17B. Elaine didn't hesitate. I did. And who benefited from the properties acquired as a result of enforcement? Elaine smiled faintly. The community. That was when the projector screen lit up. Not our presentation, someone else's. A new file, clean formatting. Corporate letterhead. The council chair frowned. This wasn't submitted by the HOA. A man stood from the back row. He hadn't spoken all night, Mid-50s. Expensive suit. Forgettable face. The kind of person you'd never remember seeing twice. My apologies, he said smoothly. That would be mine. Elaine turned. And for the first time since I'd met her, her composure cracked. Who are you? The chair demanded. The man smiled. A concerned investor. The screen changed. Names appeared. Corporations. Development firms. Political donors. At the center of it all, Harper Strategic Consulting. Elaine's father's company. The man continued, the HOA didn't act alone. It functioned as a feeder system identifying properties, applying pressure, consolidating ownership, efficient, quiet. Elaine's jaw tightened. You weren't supposed to be here. He shrugged. Plans evolve. The truth landed hard. Elaine wasn't the architect. She was the executor. The room buzzed with anger, shock, realization. Elaine opened her mouth, then closed it again. Years of control slipping through her fingers in real time. The council chair called for a recess. Lawyers converged. Reporters shouted questions no one answered. By morning, the fallout was immediate. An investigation launched. HOA accounts frozen. Rule 17B suspended indefinitely. Elaine resigned before the vote could remove her. But the real twist came later. Weeks later, a letter arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single document. A deed. My house. Transferred. I read it twice, disbelief washing over me. Attached was a note, typed, unsigned. Exposure carries risk. Silence carries value. Consider this a settlement. They hadn't lost, they cut their losses. I stood in my living room, the same one I'd nearly been forced out of, and understood the final truth. The system didn't collapse. It adapted. But Maplewood Ridge would never be the same. Neighbors talked now, questions lingered. Oversight existed where silence once lived. They wouldn't be able to do this again. Not here, not quietly. As for me, I stayed, not because I trusted the system, but because I understood it. And because the rule was never about the rule. It was about who learns how power really works and who refuses to look away once they do.